I didn't expect to spend my sister's wedding hiding behind a floral column, pretending I was just another guest who wandered in. I certainly didn't expect a stranger to slide into the empty seat beside me and whisper, "If you want to survive this, pretend you came with me." But that moment doesn't make sense unless I take you back to the day her wedding invitation arrived and cracked something inside me before the ceremony ever could. 3 months before the wedding, on an unremarkable Wednesday in April, a sleek ivory envelope arrived in my mailbox. It looked out of place among utility bills and grocery coupons, like a swan swimming in a pond full of ducks. My apartment still smelled of caramelized butter from the morning's baking shift. I had been testing Rose, vanilla pastry braids since dawn, and exhaustion clung to me like sugar dust. The name embossed in silver script on the envelope made my stomach tighten. Victoria Harrington and Daniel Prescott request the honor. My sister had always chosen names with weight. Gregory in the original story is now Daniel, an equally polished, corporate-sounding man who fit her life like a custom-tailored suit. Even before I knew anything else about him, I knew he was the type my mother adored on sight. I should have been happy for her. That's what sisters are supposed to feel: joy, pride, maybe a bittersweet ache. But instead, the memory that surfaced was Thanksgiving dinner 8 months earlier. I'd brought a maple, pecan tart I'd spent an entire weekend perfecting. Victoria had arrived late, carrying a simple boxed pie from a chain bakery. My mother had praised hers, barely glancing at mine before tucking it near the far end of the table, where hardly anyone touched it. That was always the pattern. Victoria breathed, and applause followed. I created, achieved, tried, and was told I was doing too much. The invitation included a handwritten note in Victoria's looping script. "Liz, it would mean a lot if you came. I know we've drifted. Love, V." I held that note for a long time, feeling not anger, not sadness, something quieter, like an old bruise being pressed again. That evening I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted, like she was stirring something on the stove or scrolling through emails. "Congrats," I said. "The invitation is beautiful." "Oh, good. I wasn't sure if it would reach you in time." "So you'll come?" "Of course." "How did you and Daniel meet?" A short pause. "At a corporate leadership retreat. He's regional director at Solterra Pharmaceuticals." Exactly my mother's dream resume. She had to leave soon. Wedding planning, vendors, schedules. Always a reason to cut our conversations short lately. But when she hung up, that familiar ache resurfaced. The ache of being tolerated, not cherished. The weeks leading up to the ceremony felt both fast and agonizing. I bought a soft lavender dress. Subtle, elegant, not attention-stealing. I took time off work despite my boss's reluctance. I told myself it didn't matter that I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. But deep down, I knew it did. I kept that knowledge tucked away like a loose stitch, hoping it wouldn't unravel everything. If I'd known where my name would end up on the seating chart, or who would unexpectedly sit beside me, I might have turned the car around before reaching that glittering venue in the mountains. The resort sat like a jewel against the foothills, Silver Lake waters reflecting sunlight, manicured lawns stretching out with the confidence of a place that rarely heard the word budget. Victoria and my mother must have spent months perfecting every detail. That was their shared language, appearances. I arrived earlier than necessary, hoping, foolishly, that Victoria might want help or at least a moment alone with her sister. Instead, the bridal suite was buzzing with polished laughter and champagne fizz. Bridesmaids lounged in matching silk robes, while a photographer orchestrated their every breath. Victoria caught sight of me in the mirror. "Oh, you're here early. Everything is handled. Why don't you find your seat?" The sting was immediate. I smiled anyway. A bridesmaid I didn't recognize whispered something to another, both glancing at me with that thin smile of polite dismissal. I slipped out quietly. Outside, staff swarmed around the ceremony site, adjusting ribbons already perfect and fluffing flowers that couldn't possibly be fluffier. I followed the row markers, scanning for my name with cautious hope. Maybe I'd be somewhere in the middle, not front row material, but not too far outside the family frame. Instead, my name waited at the very back row, behind a decorative column, where I wouldn't see much of anything. Not her expression as she walked down the aisle, not the vows, not the moment she became someone's wife. It felt intentional. Even the script on the card seemed to mock me. My throat tightened. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd come for her. For the idea of her. For the sisterhood I'd never actually had. Guests began to trickle in. Familiar faces from childhood holidays floated past me without recognition. My mother entered bathed in gold satin, radiating satisfaction as she was escorted to the front row. She didn't turn around. The ceremony music swelled. Bridesmaids glided. Children tossed petals. Then Victoria appeared, her dress shimmering like moonlight. Even from my obstructed angle, she was beautiful. Of course she was. I craned as far as the pillar allowed. I caught snippets, vows muffled by distance, a kiss obscured by taller guests. I should have left right then. Drove home, put on pajamas and eaten leftover pastry, dough straight from the fridge. But stubbornness, pride, or maybe hope kept me rooted to that lonely seat. When applause erupted, I clapped on a delay, feeling foolish. That's when I noticed him. The man seated 2 chairs away. Dark suit, sharp gaze, an expression that mirrored my own discomfort. When our eyes met, he gave me a soft, knowing smile. A smile that said he'd notice me, even if no one else had. And then he moved closer. "Quite the view back here," he murmured. His tone was light, but something beneath it was sincere, almost protective. I hadn't expected anyone to speak to me. Not today. I didn't know it yet, but nothing about this wedding would continue the way I expected. Because the moment the crowd rose to leave and he stepped beside me, everything, my seat, my night, my future, shifted in one breathtaking direction. He slid into the empty chair next to me with a casual confidence that didn't feel invasive, just intentional. Like he'd made a choice. Like I wasn't invisible. "I'm Aaron," he said, offering his hand. His voice carried a velvety warmth that cut through the cool mountain air. "And judging by our spectacular seating assignment, I'm guessing you and I share similar ranks on the wedding totem pole." I huffed a quiet laugh. "Elizabeth. And I'm the bride's sister, actually." His eyebrows climbed in genuine disbelief. "Her sister? And they put you behind a support beam." He glanced at the pillar as if offended on my behalf. I lifted a shoulder. "It's fine." "It's not," he said simply. "But if the rest of this wedding is anything like the ceremony, you might need backup. Interested in forming a survival alliance." The phrasing made me smile despite myself. "You don't have to babysit me." "I'm not. My +1 bailed last minute. Food poisoning. So I know exactly 2 people here. And both just got married. So trust me, you're rescuing me." There was something disarmingly easy about him. The kind of charm that didn't feel practiced, just genuine. We walked together toward the cocktail hour, and for the first time since arriving, the knot in my chest loosened a fraction. The pavilion was breathtaking, flowers draping every railing, candles flickering like scattered stars. Servers drifted by with trays of miniature masterpieces. As a pastry chef, I recognized skill when I saw it. Aaron handed me a glass of wine. "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with weddings." I laughed softly. That eliminates about 80% of the conversations happening in this room. Exactly why I led with it. I hesitated, then admitted, "I'm a pastry chef. I work at a small bakery in Denver." His entire face lit, and it wasn't performative admiration, more like a kid learning someone has magical powers. "That's incredible. What do you love making the most?" That question, what I loved, not what I did, was a strange relief. I told him about layered torts, sugar-pulled flowers, tempering chocolate. He listened like every word mattered. "What about you?" I asked. "I work in environmental design consulting. I help companies go greener. It's not as delicious as pastry, but it's rewarding." We found a quiet table near the edge of the pavilion. As the cocktail hour unfolded, the conversations around us felt like distant noise. He had this way of making the space between us feel like its own little world. But the world shattered when dinner seating was announced. My assigned spot, the furthest corner of the room again. Aaron's, equally undesirable. He stared at our place cards, then at me. "No," he said firmly. "No." He plucked both cards from the table. "We're not doing this. Tonight you're sitting with me. Near the front. Try to stop me." Before I could protest, before doubt could climb my throat, he guided me toward a table full of important-looking guests. "Just follow my lead," he whispered. and pretend we're together. My pulse fluttered. He wasn't joking. And when he introduced me as his date to a table of executives, including one who knew my sister, my world tilted in a way I wasn't prepared for. Aaron eased us into the open seats at a table decorated with gold accents and towering floral arrangements, clearly a place meant for guests who mattered. The others at the table glanced up, curious but not unkind. A woman with sleek hair and an air of authority smiled. "You must be Aaron's partner. He never introduces us to anyone he's dating." Partner? Dating? The word sent my brain scrambling. But Aaron didn't miss a beat. "Yes, this is Elizabeth." His tone wrapped the words in certainty. Warmth. Pride. It was the first time anyone had publicly claimed me like that, and even though it was pretend, something inside me softened. "And how do you know the bride and groom?" the woman asked. I opened my mouth to speak, but Aaron beat me to it. "Elizabeth is Victoria's sister." The woman's eyebrows lifted. "Victoria has a sister?" She never mentioned. There it was, the quiet sting, sharp enough to cut. I managed a polite smile. "We're not very close." The appetizers arrived, and the table conversation drifted to corporate topics, clinical trials, expansion plans, mergers. All foreign to me. Aaron, however, anchored me to the table with small gestures, brushing his fingers against mine when sharing a dish, leaning close when someone spoke too quietly. Every subtle touch felt intentional. Dinner was exquisite. Scallops, roasted vegetables, perfectly cooked meat. But my attention drifted to the speeches. Daniel's father praised his son's accomplishments. My mother followed with glowing tales of Victoria's grace, perseverance, brilliance. Not once did she mention having 2 daughters. Not once did she glance my direction. Aaron's hand found mine beneath the table, squeezing gently. I squeezed back, grateful for the grounding. The maid of honor compared Victoria to fairy tale princesses. The best man compared Daniel to future CEOs. Every toast polished their image until it gleamed blindingly. When dessert arrived, a towering chocolate confection, I tasted it automatically, my baker's brain unable to turn off. Aaron noticed my frown. "Not good." "It's beautiful," I murmured, but overworked. "Too sweet. No balance." He grinned. "I believe you could fix it in 2 minutes." That made me laugh. It felt good. When dancing began, Aaron stood and offered his hand. "Come on, dance with me. You don't have to keep pretending." "I know. This part isn't pretending." The sincerity in his voice stole my breath. He led me into the soft glow of the dance floor. We moved together, from gentle sway to slow rhythm to quiet conversation, and I felt held in a way I hadn't expected to feel tonight. "You're full of surprises," I whispered. "I'm only getting started," he said. And his smile, it was the kind that could unravel defenses I'd spent years building. After a second dance, emotion overwhelmed me and I stepped outside for air. He followed without hesitation. "Too much?" he asked gently. "No," I whispered. "Just different." He leaned against the railing beside me. Different can be good. The quiet settled around us. Warm. Safe. But that peace shattered the moment my mother spotted us and decided to finally acknowledge me, only because of the man standing at my side. The terrace doors opened and closed with bursts of laughter as guests wandered in and out. I almost felt invisible again, until I saw my mother's silhouette glide toward us, champagne glass in hand, her expression tightening when she spotted Aaron beside me. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice sweetened artificially. "I didn't expect to see you here. This table out front was meant for Daniel's professional network." Before I could respond, Aaron stepped in. Not aggressively, just firmly enough to stand between her tone and my heart. "There was a misunderstanding with the seating," he said smoothly. "We corrected it. I'm Aaron Whitlock." My mother's eyes flicked over him, recalculating everything. His tailored suit, his confidence, his presence. I could see her reassigning my worth upward purely because a man like him was near me. Her smile sharpened. "Oh, you're with Elizabeth." "Yes," he said simply, intertwining his fingers with mine in a gesture that felt startlingly real. My mother's approval slid into place like a puzzle piece. "Well, it's lovely to have you here. You know, Elizabeth doesn't usually bring someone to family events." I felt the barb hidden beneath the compliment. Aaron didn't. Or maybe he did, because he responded with quiet conviction. She's remarkable. I'm lucky she agreed to come. My mother blinked. The mask slipped for a microsecond. Surprise, maybe confusion, before she regained her polished composure. Well, enjoy the evening, she said. But as she walked away, her gaze lingered on Aaron. Not me. Validation by proxy. The oldest dance in my family. We re-entered the reception, and the night resumed its rhythm. Music, voices, flickers of candlelight. Aaron stayed close, but never suffocatingly so. It felt easy. Natural. Shockingly natural. When Victoria and Daniel finally reached our table during their rounds, her reaction mirrored my mother's, startled, strained politeness. Elizabeth, Victoria said, eyes darting between Aaron's hand resting on mine. You look lovely. Thank you, I said. The wedding is beautiful. Her smile tightened. And you're Aaron, he said warmly. Elizabeth's partner. Partner. Not date. Not +1. A word that vibrated through the air. Victoria froze for a fraction of a second. Oh, I didn't realize you were seeing someone. It's fairly recent, I said evenly. And I watched it happen, the recalibration. Suddenly, I wasn't the afterthought sister. I was the sister with someone desirable on her arm. Someone with business connections her new husband valued. Someone who mattered in the social ecosystem she curated. The irony tasted bittersweet. After they moved on, Aaron glanced at me. You okay? You got quiet. I'm just not used to being seen, I admitted. He brushed his thumb over my knuckles. Then they've been blind for far too long. Later, as sparklers lit up the night and the bride and groom made their grand exit, I found myself wishing the evening didn't have to end. Aaron offered to walk me to my room. I said yes. Outside my door, he paused. Everything felt charged, gentle but electric. I had a better night because of you, he said softly. So did I. He kissed me, slow, warm, asking permission even as he leaned in. When he pulled back, he whispered, Breakfast tomorrow. Yes, I breathed. And as he walked away, jacket slung over his shoulder, I realized the night had shifted something fundamental inside me. I didn't know then that breakfast would turn into something far bigger, an invitation not just into his life, but into a plan that would unravel everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and myself. Breakfast felt like a second ceremony, the one where truth quietly breaks through the varnish of polite smiles. I expected small talk. Instead, he set a question on the table that would rearrange the rest of my life. We met in the lobby at 9, and the morning had a hush the wedding night lacked. The resort's breakfast room felt like a secret garden, light spilling onto the lake, the hum of a few early risers. Aaron wore jeans and a sweater. The tuxedo polish of last night had fallen away into something softer. He smiled like he'd been waiting for this moment all his life. You look less tired than I expected, he said, handing me a coffee that smelled like warmth. Thanks to pastry adrenaline and too little sleep, I joked. And you? Walking proof that a good suit can survive a wedding. His grin made the butterflies in my chest behave for a second. We settled by the window, and the pace of conversation changed. We were no longer strangers performing small talk. He asked about the bakery, but not in the way most people did. He asked like someone who wanted to understand the scaffolding that made me who I was. The early mornings, the burnt hands, the pride in a perfectly laminated croissant. I answered honestly, eyes bright with the familiar spark I felt only around sugar and heat. When he told me about his work, environmental design consulting for large firms, his voice carried a kind of fire. He loved the mess of changing corporate culture, the stubborn optimism of pushing institutions toward sustainability. I admired that in him. He admired how I moved through the kitchen like a conductor. At one point, he grew quiet, watching the way the sunlight pooled on the table. Last night, he said, I saw how they treated you. I don't like it. I shrugged. It's family. That's not an excuse. He put both hands around his mug. I'd like to see you known for what you actually do. Not whispered about as the daughter who bakes. Not the peripheral sister at milestones. And how would you propose we accomplish that? I asked, wary. His expression shifted, something steady and a little dangerous. I'm part of a team consulting with a large company, Solterra Pharmaceuticals. Daniel's new firm is in talks with them about a sustainability overhaul. He watched me carefully. What if we made sure your work was visible to people who actually influence their world? Not manipulation, visibility. A chance to be acknowledged for talent, not lineage. The offer should have sounded transactional, but it didn't. It sounded like a hand extended because someone believed you deserved to grab it. It also sounded like a lever we could use, a way to change the geometry of a family that had long enjoyed placing me in the margins. You mean use your connections? My voice betrayed the part of me that cringed at anything resembling revenge. No, I mean create opportunities. Introduce you to people who will judge you on your craft, not your family name. Let your work speak where your relatives won't. He smiled, a blend of hope and resolve. And if your sister notices, that's a consequence of her own choices, not our cruelty. I sipped coffee until the steam blurred the edges of that proposal. The logic was seductive, my craft elevated on a stage where it could not be ignored. The ethics were murky. I had always been proud of making things honestly, not by leveraging relationships. Give me time, I said finally. I can't promise anything. Take all the time you need. But know this, I'm not asking you to be someone else. I'm asking you to be the version of you they've willfully ignored. His words landed like encouragement and a dare. I walked back to my room with my heart beating too fast for breakfast. The choice was not only about whether to accept help, it was about whether I wanted to stop being satisfied with being overlooked. By the time he asked me to attend a corporate dinner with him in Denver, I still hadn't decided, but I agreed anyway, because something in his confidence felt like oxygen to my stubborn, squeezed-in lungs. The dinner was meant to be business. It became a crossroads where my quiet life and his polished world collided, and the collision hurt and dazzled in equal measure. When he called to invite me to the client dinner, I hesitated. I knew nothing about consulting luncheons, strategic presentations, or the private choreography of high-powered networking. But Aaron had a way of framing things that made risk feel less solitary. "You'll keep me honest," he'd said, and honestly, I liked being the ballast for someone else's ego. The restaurant was a low-lit temple of culinary precision. The kind of menu where adjectives outnumbered ingredients. Aaron's client, Patricia, the same woman who'd smiled at our dinner at the wedding, greeted us at the table like an old friend. She was polished, incisive, and immediately curious about me. That curiosity was different. It cut past the polite gloss to the real. "You're a pastry chef?" she asked, leaning in. "Yes. I work at Willow and Stone in Denver." "You'll have to tell me your secrets," she said, genuinely interested. For once, someone listened without converting my work into a family anecdote. Halfway through the meal, the conversation flowed into projects and proposals. Aaron spoke easily, and Patricia pivoted deftly from industry talk to a compliment about the dessert program the restaurant was trying that evening. When the deconstructed lemon tart arrived, it was beautiful. Too beautiful, maybe. I couldn't help myself. Critique was reflex. "Lavender's lovely," I said, "but it's overpowering here. The lemon needs to sing brighter." "Could you fix it?" Patricia asked with an amused tilt. Before I could overthink it, I found myself explaining the balance of acid and floral notes, how to pull the lavender back to a whisper. She listened not like someone being polite, but like someone genuinely considering collaboration. By the end of the night, the restaurant manager had asked for my card, and Patricia said, "We're planning a summer gala to celebrate our sustainability milestone. I'd love your bakery to create the dessert program, if your schedule allows. And I'll personally vouch for you." In the parking lot, Aaron watched me with a look I've learned to equate with pride. "See," he said, "you didn't have to use anyone. You were just you." "Maybe," I replied, the adrenaline a little dizzying. "But you put me at the table where people could see me." He shrugged. Sometimes people just need to be put in the right room. That night, I went home thinking about the way doors open for some people like they're designed to. No effort, no friction, while others have to knock until their knuckles bleed. This was a knock, and someone had answered. Over the next few days, Patricia's assistant called with specifics. The gala was indeed happening. The client was Bennett. No, Solterra Pharmaceuticals had been renamed in this version, and Patricia wanted my bakery's name on the invite. She wanted visibility, not a token credit. The opportunity was real, concrete, and lucrative. My boss at the bakery was thrilled, but practical. "We'll need a plan," she said. "You'll have to scale prep hours, source more staff for that weekend. This is a big job, Liz. You sure you want us to take it on? I was sure, but not just because of potential revenue. There was a deeper hunger, the desire to have my work judged on merit, not family narratives. I'd built a life on dough and tempering. I was ready to let it speak where words had failed. When I told Aaron, he beamed like someone who had watched a plan come together. This is only the start, he said softly. Not because of me, but you. Because they're going to meet the real you. I slept that night with a hand-shaped warmth on my cheek where his had brushed mine. Pride and fear tangled in equal measure. But the road from a gala contract to real recognition runs through messy places, family conversations, old wounds, and a sister who still didn't know how to be kind without performance. Opportunity revealed itself like a bright, hot oven door, dangerous if mishandled, but promising if you had the nerve to open it all the way. Planning the gala became a masterclass in logistics, creativity, and late nights. My bakery reorganized around the project. Schedules shifted, staff hours expanded, and my plans grew into layered timelines. I worked with precision, sourcing local citrus, booking extra ovens, hiring prep help. I slept in fragments, the kind of sleep that comes after stepping into a storm and demanding you'll weather it. Aaron was a quiet force in the background. He never took center stage, but his introductions and the confidence he carried eased more meetings than he realized. Patricia proved more than a fleeting advocate. She became an active partner, sharing details, connecting me to vendors, and even sneaking in a complimentary tasting with a group of potential sponsors. Through it all, the awkward family echoes from the wedding haunted me. I tried to avoid thinking about how Victoria or my mother would react when they learned I was catering an event tied to the very company her husband's firm worked with. But as the media list for the gala circulated, I felt a flicker of anticipation. What would it feel like to have them see my name in print, or to hear colleagues compliment my work where they couldn't pretend they hadn't noticed? One evening, as I walked the bakery floor arranging final tasting boxes, my phone buzzed. It was Victoria, unexpected in its timing, casual in its tone. Liz, I heard about the gala. Patricia mentioned it at an event. Congratulations. I didn't know you were doing large corporate events. Her text carried that practice neutrality our family had long favored when addressing inconvenient facts. I typed, deleted, typed again. I wanted to respond with something that would contain all the years of barely concealed slights, with the ache of being sidelined, but the new version of myself, sharpened by long ovens and late nights, chose restraint. Thank you, I wrote. It's a big job. I'm excited. Her reply was brisk. We should get coffee before the gala. I'd love to hear more. We hardly get time to talk lately. Part of me wanted to say no. Old patterns whispered that these meetups always ended with me placating her need to feel superior. But a different part, the part that tasted the sweetness of earned opportunities, wanted to meet the sister who, until now, had been more a constellation than a person to me. We met at a cafe in her neighborhood, the kind of place she described as charming. She appeared sunlit, briefcase in tow, the image of newlywed contentment. We made small talk, and for 20 minutes we pretended the past was a place we had both left behind. Then she asked, casually, So, Patricia mentioned the desserts. That's a big client. Are you nervous? Nervous as fuel, I said. I respect the scale, but I'm ready. Her eyes slid over me, calculating. It's funny. When you came to the wedding, Daniel and his colleagues didn't even know you were his sister. Silence sagged between us. They did now, I said. She shrugged with an economy of movement that felt like dismissal. Right. Well, I'm glad it's working out for you. Working out echoed like a judgment, but I kept my voice even. It is. Because I'm the one making it happen. Victoria blinked as if surprised by the statement's clarity. I hope it brings the recognition you want. I felt something shift, an ember of old resentment and new strength at the same time. We're not the same, V. I've chosen a different life, and I don't need validation from the same people who learned to love only what fit their image. I needed people who saw my work for what it is. Her expression shifted, an unreadable flicker of guilt, annoyance, maybe even a grudging respect. When I left the cafe, my hands were steady. The gala loomed in 2 weeks. It was one thing to make exceptional desserts, It was another to stand in the room when everyone applauded, even the people who'd always pretended I didn't exist. The night of the gala arrived like an oven door opening, hot, loud, and full of light, and when Patricia stepped up to speak, I had no idea she would hand me a moment that changed everything. When a spotlight finds you, it reveals the parts of yourself you've kept in shadow, and sometimes it reveals your family's discomfort, too. The event hall glittered with light, chandeliers, pin-spot beams on centerpieces, and a buzz of conversation that felt almost orchestral. My display of desserts had been arranged like jewelry, each piece a tiny architecture of flavor. The pastry table looked like the thing I'd always wanted it to be, a testament to craft, not apology. Patricia greeted me with the warmth of someone claiming proud parenthood. "Everyone's impressed," she whispered. "This is exactly what we wanted." Her microphone later cut through the room. She thanked Aaron's team for their work and pivoted to mention the evening's culinary highlights. My heart trembled as she approached the dessert table and gestured to me. "Elizabeth created every dessert you've enjoyed tonight," she said publicly, her voice warm and intentional. Her artistry is exactly the kind of innovation we want to champion as part of our sustainability-focused events. I'm thrilled to announce we'll be partnering with her bakery for all our upcoming celebratory events. For the first time in my life, applause landed on me with the tangible weight of acknowledgement. People I barely knew came to speak, congratulating, requesting business cards, asking where they could find my pastries. Cameras clicked. A few local bloggers I'd never met approached for interviews. I looked for my family in the crowd. Victoria and my mother stood together, pristine and polished, but their faces were no longer the complacent shields they'd worn at the wedding. My mother's mouth was a taut line. Victoria watched me like someone noticing, for the first time, a new constellation in familiar sky. Later, my mother approached with a forced smile. "This is unexpected, Elizabeth," she said, hand fluttering toward the dessert table as if to confirm its reality. "Very impressive." "Thank you," I said. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a bribe for affection. It was recognition of the work I had done. Victoria's glance carried something complicated, regret braided with annoyance. "I didn't realize you'd have the capacity for something this large," she ventured. It sounded less like curiosity than a thinly veiled attempt to understand how I'd become visible in spaces she considered hers. Aaron's fingers found mine in a quiet, steadying grip. "You did this," he murmured. "Not me." "Not entirely," I wanted to say. But the truth had many layers. He'd opened doors. I'd walked through them and carried the heat of the ovens with me. That night changed the grammar of our family conversations. A week later, invites came with my name on them in a different tone. People who had skimmed my existence before now paused to ask about my next project. The industry thanks were real. They mattered in a way my mother's hollow compliments never had. Victoria called the next day, her voice careful. "I wanted to say congratulations," she said. "This looks successful." "Thank you," I answered simply. There was space between us now that felt less like absence and more like distance where two distinct lives lived. It was peaceful in its own way. I'd stopped asking for crumbs, and somewhere inside, a small, fierce satisfaction burned, not for what I'd inflicted on them, but for what I'd built for myself. But the real test wasn't the applause, it was whether the changes would hold. Family dynamics don't reset overnight, and the ripple effects from the gala would force decisions and reckonings none of us had planned for. Success changes the shape of a room. Suddenly I wasn't the forgotten sister on the edges. I was someone people adjusted their posture for. And my family felt that shift like a tremor. In the weeks after the gala, my life rewrote itself in small but profound ways. The bakery expanded my responsibilities. New clients called daily, private events, corporate luncheons, upscale parties. My work moved from the quiet back kitchen to public stages I'd never expected to stand on. Aaron became woven into my days. He tasted my samples, offered wording suggestions for proposals, massaged my shoulders when I'd spent too long leaning over the marble slab. He was steady in the way weathered oak is steady, rooted, warm, dependable. But he also carried an intensity, a determination that both exhilarated and frightened me. It was the kind of focus I recognized from fire, beautiful, powerful, but capable of burning. Despite all the changes around me, my mother refused to update her vocabulary. "You're getting so busy, dear," she said over dinner one evening. Just make sure this little wave of attention doesn't distract you from planning a real future. A real future. Code for marriage, children, and a life that fit her social narratives. I'd always let comments like that slide. This time I didn't. A real future, I said, is one I choose. She blinked sharply, as if unused to being confronted by the daughter she trained to remain agreeable. I only meant. I know what you meant, I said gently but firmly. And I think you're going to have to accept that my life won't look like Victoria's. Her mouth tightened, but she nodded just barely. A beginning, maybe. Meanwhile, Victoria hovered at the edges of my new world. She invited me to brunches, sent texts asking about the bakery's projects, even suggested we take a yoga class together. It all felt like someone trying to repair a bridge only after realizing they needed to cross it. One afternoon, she called sounding oddly breathless. Liz, do you have a minute? Sure. So, at Daniel's board meeting today, the CEO mentioned the gala's dessert program. They were impressed. And Daniel didn't even know you were the one behind it. He was shocked. In a good way. I waited. And he said, her voice lowered, that you made his department look good. That partnering with someone like you reflects positively on our family. Isn't that amazing? There it was, the catch. My worth framed through the lens of how it supported them, not me. I'm glad the company liked the desserts, I said evenly. But it wasn't for the family. It was for the work. She hesitated. Right. Of course. I didn't mean. It's okay, I said. I'm just clarifying. She inhaled sharply, as though swallowing words she didn't know how to shape. We should get coffee soon. Maybe, I answered honestly. I hung up with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. We were talking, but it wasn't real connection, just recalibrated expectation. Aaron noticed my quietness that evening. You're thinking too loudly, he said, brushing my cheek. Just realizing that being seen comes with new complications. But they're seeing you now. That's a start. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch. I didn't tell him I feared visibility might come with its own shadows. That fear deepened when Aaron made a confession, one that rewrote everything I thought I understood about his involvement in my sudden rise. Every relationship has a moment where the truth cracks open, not to break it, but to test its strength. Aaron's truth was a storm I never saw coming. We were cleaning up after dinner at my apartment when he paused, dish towel twisting in his hands, an uncharacteristic sign of nerves. Liz, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you. My pulse quickened. Okay. You know the sustainability project Solterra is undergoing? I nodded. My firm didn't just stumble into that contract. I pushed for it. Hard. And part of the reason was you. Something in the air shifted, sharp and electric. Me? Aaron, what does that mean? It means, he said carefully, that after the wedding, after seeing how they treated you, I wanted to create opportunities for you to be seen in the worlds where they measure value. I knew Solterra executives mingled with board members, spouses, extended circles. I knew if your work intersected with that space, they couldn't ignore you anymore. I stared at him, torn between awe and unease. Aaron, that's not just visibility. That's strategy. Not manipulation, he insisted. Strategy that aligns with your talent. You rose because you're brilliant, not because I forced anything. I only opened the door. You engineered pathways that led to the gala invitation. I encouraged them, he corrected gently. The choice to hire you was entirely theirs. My heart pounded. Part of me, the wounded child who fought for scraps of validation, felt a fierce surge of gratitude. He hadn't just seen me, he believed in me enough to take risks. But the adult in me hesitated. You should have told me, I whispered. I know. I didn't because I needed to be sure it wasn't pity, that I wasn't doing this for the wrong reasons. And now, he said, stepping closer, I know it's love, and I'd do anything to ensure you stop shrinking for people who refuse to see your shine. The word love hit me like a tide, unexpected and overwhelming. Aaron, my voice trembled. I love you too, but I can't build a life on invisible strings. He cupped my face, eyes earnest. No strings. Just support. You decide the rest. I believed him. I also feared what this meant for my already fragile relationship with Victoria. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay awake replaying his confession, feeling pulled between two truths. He believed in me fiercely, authentically. He had influenced the ecosystem around me, quietly, powerfully. By morning, I made peace with a difficult realization. His strategy hadn't created my talent. It had only elevated the stage. I had still done the work. But would my family think the same? 2 days later, I received the answer. Victoria called, voice trembling at the edges. I heard something, she said. At Daniel's office, rumors that Aaron's firm influenced the company's gala partnerships. Did he push your name? My breath caught. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, she whispered. Is it true? This was the moment where transparency and loyalty and old wounds collided. Victoria, I said carefully, my work earned the contract. I didn't ask about your work, she snapped. Hurt, not cruel. I asked if he helped open the door. Silence stretched. Finally, I said, yes, he helped. A sharp inhale. So, you needed him to be taken seriously. No, I corrected, calm now. I needed someone to believe in me. You never did. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then she hung up. I thought that conversation would be the breaking point. I didn't expect it to become the beginning of something neither of us had ever managed before: honesty. Sometimes relationships mend not through apologies, but through confrontation, through the painful pulling of old threads until the truth sits bare between you. 2 days after the abrupt phone call, Victoria showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in my doorway, arms crossed, eyes glossy, not with tears, but with unsorted emotion. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. She wandered my living room like someone surveying foreign territory, touching books on my shelf, pausing at framed photos of bakery moments. It was the first time she'd been in my space in years. Finally, she spoke. When you said I never believed in you, she swallowed. It hurt, because I don't think I ever let myself believe in you. I didn't know how. Her honesty knocked the breath out of me. She continued, voice trembling. You were different from me. From everything Mom expected. I followed the rules. You broke them. I got praised. You got questioned. And somewhere in there, I started to resent you for not wanting what I wanted. I leaned against the countertop, stunned by her clarity. It always felt like you dismissed me, I said softly. I did, she whispered, because admitting you were right about finding your own path meant admitting I might have chosen wrong. Her confession cracked something in both of us. You didn't choose wrong, V. You chose your life. I know, she said, but I measured myself, and you by Mom's metrics. And when you didn't fit them, I convinced myself that meant you'd failed. A long pause. And then at the gala, she continued, I watched a room full of powerful people applaud you. They saw you, admired you, and it terrified me because I realized I'd spent our entire lives refusing to look. My chest felt too small for my heart. She wiped beneath one eye. Did Aaron help? Yes. But you were the reason it worked. You made it impossible for people to ignore you. I nodded slowly. I needed someone to open the door. But I walked through it. And locked it behind you, she said with a faint, sad smile. In a good way. In a way that forced me to stop pretending you were the problem. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, like a pause after the truth finally lands. So, she said quietly, where do we go from here? Forward, I replied. With boundaries. Her shoulders dropped, relief softening her features. Boundaries are fair. And honesty. I can do that, she whispered. We sat on the couch, talking, not as estranged sisters, but as two women finally acknowledging the architecture of their relationship. It wasn't perfect restoration, but it was real. When she left, she hugged me, awkward at first, then steady. I'm proud of you, she said into my hair. For the first time, I believed her. But healing doesn't erase the past, and the consequences of being invisible for so long came back into focus when my mother demanded a meeting of her own. My mother had mastered the art of polished concern. But there are moments when even well-kept facades fracture, and the truth beneath is far less pristine. She invited me to lunch at her favorite country club, neutral ground where confrontation could be softened by linen napkins and polite distance. I almost declined, but avoiding her had never changed anything. The moment I arrived, she offered a brittle smile. Elizabeth, you look tired. Are you overworking yourself? No more than usual, I replied calmly. She nodded, but the line between her brows remained. I've been hearing things. That your boyfriend engineered business connections. That he influenced the company's choices. Mom, I said with measured control, he helped open opportunities. I earned everything else. I'm not questioning your work, she countered, though her tone suggested otherwise. I just don't want you to build a life on favors. I set down my water glass. You mean you don't want me surpassing expectations you'd already written for me? Her eyes widened, affronted. That's not fair. I've always wanted what's best for you. No, I said gently. You've always wanted what's safe. What's familiar. What matches the image you crafted. She stiffened. And what's wrong with wanting stability? Nothing, I said. But confusing stability with success is what made you ignore half of who I am. She looked away, throat tight. Your sister said something similar. She and I talked, I said. Good, she murmured, but her eyes filled, not with tears, but with the tension of someone fighting their own reflection. After a long silence, she asked, Why didn't you tell me you were struggling all those years? Feeling overlooked? Because you didn't want to hear it, I answered. Not unkindly, just true. You loved us both, but you loved her path more. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to make you feel less. I know, I whispered, but intent doesn't rewrite impact. She reached across the table, hesitant, uncertain. I'm trying, Elizabeth. I placed my hand in hers. Then keep trying. We stayed like that, hands clasped, years of silence humming between us, until she finally exhaled a shaky breath. I'm proud of you, she said, voice breaking in a way I'd never heard. It was the closest thing to an apology she could offer. I accepted it for what it was, not a fix, but an opening. As lunch came to an end, she dabbed her eyes and said, I suppose I need to adjust my definition of success. That's all I ever wanted, I said. For you to see me without comparing me. She nodded tightly. I'll work on that. And for the first time, I believed she might. Later that evening, Aaron held me on the couch as I recounted the conversation. He listened with the patience I'd come to depend on. You're healing entire bloodlines, he teased softly. More like cleaning out decades of cobwebs, I replied. He kissed my temple. You're incredible. As I rested my head against his chest, I realized something startling. I wasn't fighting to be seen anymore. I was choosing who I allowed into the light. And just when I thought the story had settled, career blooming, relationships mending, love deepening, life revealed its final twist. The future I never dared imagine was finally within reach. Every ending is a beginning wearing a new dress. Mine arrived not with fireworks, but with the smell of warm sugar and a question that changed everything. Months passed, each one richer than the last. My bakery work expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. Private tastings, custom commissions, even a feature in a regional culinary magazine. The Gala partnership led to ongoing projects with Solterra and additional clients who'd admired my work from afar. My confidence grew. My voice steadied. I began leaning into the truth that talent wasn't arrogance. It was lived experience sharpened into craft. And alongside that growth, my relationships with Erin, my sister, and even my mother shifted into new, healthier shapes. We weren't suddenly a flawless family, but we were a more honest one. Then, one crisp autumn evening, while I was decorating a batch of pistachio rose tartlets, Erin walked into the bakery after hours carrying a familiar box, the kind jewelers use with intentional subtlety. You're early, I said, smiling. I needed to talk to you, he said, stepping closer. His eyes held that softness he saved for moments that mattered. About us. My breath caught. He took the piping bag from my hand and set it aside gently. Elizabeth, he began. When I met you at the wedding, you were sitting behind a pillar, alone, unseen, undervalued. And I remember thinking, how can someone like her be invisible in a room that needs light? My throat tightened. You changed my life without even trying. You made me want to fight for something bigger than myself. Not out of pity, out of love. Real, absurd, expansive love. My hands trembled. Aaron! He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, unmistakably us. I don't want to engineer your path, he whispered. I want to walk it with you. Side by side. No strategies. No leverage. Just two people choosing the same future. Tears blurred the world into soft watercolor shapes. You didn't have to do any of this, I whispered. He smiled. I didn't have to love you either. But I do. Entirely. I took the ring with shaking fingers. Then yes, I breathed. 1,000 times yes. He lifted me off the ground in a sweeping embrace. The ovens were still warm, and the scent of sugar and pistachios filled the air, my version of a perfect fairy tale. We sank onto the flour-dusted prep table, laughing through tears. I felt whole in a way I'd never known growing up. Not because someone chose me, but because I'd chosen myself first, and everyone else followed. The wedding I dreaded months ago had become the strange catalyst for a life where I was finally seen, loved, and deeply respected. Later, as I locked up the bakery and took Aaron's hand, I realized something profound. My story had never been about revenge. It had never been about proving my family wrong. It had been about stepping into my rightful place after years of shrinking. And once I stood fully in the light, everything else, love, opportunity, healing, found me naturally. The best part, my family could either grow with me or fall behind. I was no longer building my life around their expectations. I looked at Aaron, my fiancé, with a heart full of quiet certainty. This, I whispered, is the life I was always meant to live. He kissed my forehead. And we're just getting started.